Hey, what's up? Arvin here. Welcome to Driven to Draw, where I teach you how to be more creative through the very act of drawing. Drawing is an excellent way of reducing your stress and trying to exercise a little bit of more creativity and using that right side of your brain. Today, we're going to be going through some sketching techniques just by using a pencil. So without further delay, let's get started. Alright, so today's topic to me is pretty exciting because I really enjoy working on sketching techniques, and we're going to be utilizing some different kind of subject matter here. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to this channel because I know you love learning all these different techniques. I know I love teaching it to you guys and learning something new myself. And then on this particular episode, I'm just going to teach you how to draw these little circles and these dots. I'm just kidding. Alright, so for this particular demonstration, I'm going to be drawing a lizard, and this is what's really cool because this is a little bit of a challenge, and I'm just going to show you what my approach is and how I go about doing it. Now, I've never done this before, so I'm essentially utilizing some of the same techniques I've used in a lot of my other sketches, and I'm just applying it to a different subject. So let's get it on. Now, the first thing I'm going to be doing when I tackle this drawing is to just get my basic outline of the subject matter. So I've got a lizard here. Actually, it's not a lizard. I think I'm going to have to go back and ask my son what this is because he's a huge fan of lizards and reptiles, frogs, all that good stuff. So what I'm doing here is I start off with just using basic shapes. So I'm going to create basically like the skeleton, and I'm just going to draw this oval shape like you saw me do here at the beginning, and I'm just going to add in some of my construction lines as I go through this. And part of this process is just to kind of measure things out. Proportionally I want this thing to be correct, so I'll start off with getting my eyes in, and then I'll get the overall shape of the head, and then I will start to add my construction lines and sort of eyeball some things. Now, if you're just starting out and you're just a beginner, sometimes it might be better to use a grid to take your reference image and then place a grid on top of it and then divide that up because that helps you to understand the proportions, because at the beginning you may not have that developed the amount of practice to be able to see and to relate to distances freehand or just by observation, and that takes that takes a little bit of time to get used to. So this is going to be my first step, and I want to make sure that everything that I've got here is correct. It's the size of the eyeballs are correct, the size of the head is correct, my foreshortening is correct, and all I'm doing is just lightly sketching those outlines out and then making sure I've got my solid base. And then the first thing I'm going to do is just establish the eye. I'm just adding some value here to the eyeball. By the way, be sure to comment below. If you've got questions, let me know what your questions are and I'll be happy to answer it for you. Now, the second part of my technique, this is where I start to look at blocking in the overall values and just getting a lot of shading that's done at the beginning of the drawing, because I've got basically a white page and I want to tone all that stuff down. And so part of this technique is just to use the side of your pencil, and then the side of the pencil allows you to cover a lot of surface area within your drawing and your page, and it allows me to quickly see just the contrast and the value distribution between what I'm laying down on pencil versus what I'm seeing in my reference photograph. So I'm going to now just block in all these colors, because on my reference photograph I'm seeing these different shades between your light to very darker values, and I'm just applying that shading in those particular areas. So So all I'm going to do is now, it's basically what I'm doing is like texturizing it, you know, like a pre-texture. You know, some people can, you know, may want to go in and smooth it out, take some cotton and then smudge everything. I enjoy seeing the texture. And the other reason why you don't want to use like a fine tipped or sharp point is you don't want to see those streaks, or maybe you do. I don't know, but I generally just want to see the value distribution at the beginning, so that it kind of lays out and three-dimensionalizes the overall drawing. And you can see on the drawing above, I did the same thing. And it's just basically the same technique. Is I want to see the value distribution right at the beginning, as early as possible, because I get intimidated looking at a white page. I can't stand looking at a white page. I've got to start getting some value in there and just disrupt it a little bit. And this is what this does. Now, you can always start with a half-tone, like gray sheet of paper, and that'll kind of cure this problem. But this is also a very good habit to take, because working with the side of your pencil is really good. You cover a lot of space in a little bit of time. So, you know, speed is also part of this technique, is to kind of go through in your mind with what you're seeing on your reference photograph and trying to replicate that quickly. And then you can come back in and start to tighten things up and start adding some details. But this is, you know, this part of it is really using the side of your pencil to cover a lot of surface area for the value distribution. That's what this technique is. Alright, now that we got most of the shading out of the way, the third technique we're going to implement here is the texturizing. That is making sure that we bring a little bit of the texture of the lizard here, and just to make all these tiny little dots and circles. This is something my son loves to do on his dinosaur drawings, but I tell you, he goes hog wild. I mean, this guy, he draws like a million circles. I always try to tell him, hey, you know, this part of the technique, you don't need to draw every single scale on your dinosaurs. So, you know, part of the technique here is to put enough of that detail in through different areas, but just kind of fade it out into the transitional areas, so you don't have to texturize the entire drawing. All you want to do is for someone to look at it and get a little bit of visual interest as they're kind of going through it. And that'll transition to some of the areas outside of the eyes, but that's where I don't have to put all those circles in. You know, I may just stop there, and then I'll just spread them out a little bit, and then transition back into the mouth. Alright, I'm going to try to zoom in here a little bit so you can see it, get a closer view. And then I'm going to transition that here past the eye, close to the body. Now notice what I'm doing is, you know, as I'm texturizing this, I'm going to go back even with the side of my pencil and just areas where I want to fill in some value, so I don't have to texturize it in those areas. I'm just going to add a little bit more value. Which is fine. It's not like you gotta, you know, follow the same sequence all the time. You're gonna, you know, as you start to get better and better at drawing, you're gonna go back and readjust, and you can start off with some preliminary steps. You know, the skeleton structure, when you're making sure that the proportions are correct. You know, you got to do that at the beginning because it's got to be right, because there's no sense in rendering something that's completely wrong. It just won't look right. No matter how well you render it at the end, if it's jacked up at the beginning, it's going to be jacked up in the end. Except you just wasted all that time rendering everything. So, I'm going to continue with the side of my pencil. And I might even add these little dots with the side of my pencil a little bit. That also adds some texture to it. and then go back with texturizing. Okay. Alright, so now the last technique is to go back to the detailing here. So I'm gonna now switch. We went with the side of the pencil, right? Then we went with texturizing with adding all those little oval shapes for the scales. And then now the last part is to go with the fine tip. So here's where I can add another kind of texture here, which is looking at the direction of the lines as I'm shading things. And I'm going to be able to go back and also darken up the silhouettes, the silhouette of the face a little bit, and make some of the eyes just pop out a little bit. So I might come in here and darken up the eyes a little bit. So this is kind of going through a very quick view of the entire drawing and then making my final corrections. I've got it. I'm pretty satisfied. I mean, you can always make improvements as you start drawing more and more. But remember, everything I'm doing here is really related to an existing technique that I've learned drawing something else. So if I'm drawing cars, I don't draw scales, obviously, right? But you know, I have those fundamentals and I have those basics down, so I know what to look for. So I think that once you get into the habit of drawing, you get to be at a pretty good pro level. You really can draw a lot of different subjects. You don't have to be a complete expert. Now, I'm not going to be as good as some of the pros who just only do dinosaurs, lizards, and reptiles, all those things, and they've spent their entire life doing it. Of course, I'm not going to be as good as that. But you know, that's not my goal. My goal is just to expand and just experiment and just enjoy that process, and that's what you should be doing too. Don't get caught up on the how professional your drawings look, because it's just going to get you in trouble. So here we go, last part. Let me go back and add some scales, do some final touch-ups, final texturizing. But I think this is it. Well, that's it. I hope you guys got something out of this and you learned something a little bit new. These were the 3 different pencil sketching techniques that I use to improve my drawings and the things that I kind of go through as I'm going through different subjects. So be sure again to subscribe if you really enjoy this kind of content, and I'll see you next time, next week on Driven to Draw. Have a good week, guys.